Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. The candidates tournament has begun. 8 players battling it out to see who will be the challenger for Magnus Carlsen if he wants to play another World Championship match. Anyway, let's not think about that yet. These 8 players. Well, it's really such a wide open contest. I tipped 2 players who could well win the tournament, Liren and Fabiano Caruana. I'm hardly going out on a limb with those 2. So let's take a look at the game between Liren and Jan Nepomniachtchi from the first round. I'm actually going to look at 2 games in 2 separate videos. So check out the next video after this one. Anyway, Ding against Nepo. Here we go. Ding playing white. C4. Okay, that's not unusual for him. E5. And G3. And here, well, one might expect knight f6. And then this kind of reversed Sicilian position. This, of course, is very popular. But Nepo went with c6. So wanting to build a strong centre with d5. And Ding challenges that with knight f3, attacking the pawn, which advances. So already we've got a very interesting position, actually, where black has this big centre, or at least challenging in the centre. And the knight comes back. So, you know, a very dynamic position, actually, or at least a very unbalanced position. As far as I can see from the databases, I've never seen Nepo play this position before. But Ding has certainly experienced from this position. Even this year he's played this. So, you know, that's an intriguing one. So, you know, perhaps I'm guessing that Nepo had prepared this specially. And, well, knight c3 is the normal move, attacking the queen. And queen e5, and bishop g2, and knight a6. So this is actually quite a sort of well-known starting position in this opening. So this knight could enter the game on one of these squares, or perhaps drop back to c7, and bishop e7. So, I mean, several moves have been tried here. Ding has actually played this with with black previously. But anyway, he's also played it white, so knight e3. So a really intriguing situation where this pawn sort of bottles up white's pieces, prevents, you know, this bishop flying. You know, it's possible to move that d pawn. In fact, just going back here, you know, if white wants to play, you know, in a more straightforward way, you could just advance this d pawn, and that would practically force this exchange. So, I mean, that's a simpler way for white to play. But, you know, black has fairly good equalising chances there. But knight e3 sort of keeps the position more complex. And it's very double-edged. And here, a3 played. So Ding is actually following a game that he played earlier in the year against Niemann in one of these online tournaments. So, I mean, a3 is pretty clear. You want to advance on the queen side with b4 and bring the queen's bishop into play. But it's interesting that, you know, white is not challenging black's central control. And this gives, you know, that pawn here has carved out territory and gives black space to maneuver. Rook e8 looks pretty good in order to guard this. And here, so that game I mentioned, Ding against Niemann, went c5. And, well, Ding eventually lost this game, but actually around here, this is probably quite nice for white. You know, it's possible to use this square. And white has gained some nice space on the queen side. But here, Nepo comes up with a new move. He played knight g4, and actually, I mean, with hindsight, I think this is quite a critical moment in the game. And I think Ding bottles it, basically. Here he can take a pawn. So why didn't he take this pawn? Well, one, I think, he would have been very wary about going into something that Nepo had prepared extremely well. I have no doubt that this is preparation, maybe even from the World Championship match. That's possible, if not just for this game. So, why didn't he take this? Well, it opens up the centre of the board. Okay, this bishop should retreat at some point. Queen here. The queen is very actively placed. So knight takes. You can see that black's development is excellent here. And, these rooks just power through the middle of the board. There's going to be pressure on the E and D files. This bishop perhaps comes to f6. I mean, there's no doubt that black's activity certainly gives very decent compensation here. And, I mean, the computer thinks that white is okay, but from a human point of view, I can understand why Ding was reluctant to go into this, particularly, if your opponent is well versed in this position. This is very tricky to deal with, this black's activity. So Ding backed down. And it's funny, from this moment on, just psychologically, I mean, this is said with hindsight, it felt as though Ding was on the back foot. Queen h5, and black has plenty of activity anyway. Mate threatened. h4. And bishop f6. So white can no longer take that pawn. Obviously, if that's taken, then bishop takes, followed by rook takes. So Ding basically decided just to develop rather than taking this pawn, which would have given black more activity. Knight takes e3, d takes e3. So it's a very unusual kind of pawn formation, this actually, with these double e pawns. Bishop f5. So Nepo can now protect that pawn, which bottles in the bishop. The king side is closed for the moment. Ding plays knight a4. Bishop takes, knight c7. So things are running fairly smoothly for black now. This knight comes into the middle. Rook fd1. Ding, whoops, yeah. I beg your pardon. Knight c7, knight c4. Rook e6. So that prepares for potentially the second rook to come over. And also, well, black might be thinking of playing g5 and swinging the rook over into the attack. So this is the danger for white. So has Ding got enough play in the middle of the board and on the queen side? Rook fd1. Okay, seems reasonable. But knight d5. So shuts the d file. Rook d4. And here black can already play g5 actually, but Nepo went for h6, preparing it more slowly. Queen d2, and that one, well, as we'll see, there are tactical problems with the queen on d2. Rook e8, just all the pieces joining in, making sure this one's protected. King h2. So suddenly Ding got a bit worried about g5. I think he's basically preparing to bring that rook over to h1 in order to defend. Something like this. I mean, even this is probably quite dubious, but anyway, that's his defense. But actually Nepo really turns the screw here. Bishop g4, so that's why you can see the rook came over to defend this e-pawn, and that gives this bishop freedom, which now attacks the pawn here. Knight a5, trying to get some counterplay, but it's too little too late. Rook f6 hits the pawn. And now if that's defended with the rook, then bishop e2 is strong, attacking the rook. So the king came back, so it's been a wasted journey. And in fact, the rook is very well placed on f6, helps with the attack. And finally, g5 comes. Could have been played before, but anyway, it's arrived, and it is incredibly strong. If the pawns are exchanged, then the h file is clear. And do you see with that king on with the queen on d2, it actually, in some variations, prevents the king escaping. So this is one of the tactical problems with the queen on d2. g5 just played. Knight takes b7 and g takes h4. Nepo has broken through on the king side. The knight comes back, attacking the e-pawn, but h3. And there really is no good defense for white here. Already it is crushing. So for example, if the bishop comes back, then h2 check. And queen f5. There you go, the rook coming into play. It's a complete disaster. Or if knight takes e4, you can take on g2. And this is also winning for black. With, well, obviously, you know, mate is threatened, and yeah, it's a disaster, and you know, watch out for this one as well. Rook takes e4, and now Nepo wrapped up very sweetly. Pawn takes bishop, threatening a mate. Rook takes rook, giving up the rook on e8. And here, well, okay, this is a very standard tactical finish. How does black finish from here? I'll have a slurp of tea, you have a little think. How does black finish from here? This is not too difficult. Of course, rook takes pawn, and this leads to checkmate on g1. There you go. That queen is a problem. The king cannot step away. So here's the position. Instead of taking f4, and that was a very nice finish. Check. The rook is taken here. Mate threatened. King takes, and now here we go. Final move of the game. Can you spot it? Black to play and win. A simple deflection. And here, Ding resigned. If king h2, well, that's easy. That's mate next move. And if king takes, then the king is chased up the board. And that one isn't too difficult, followed by checkmate here. One of these moves is going to be checkmate. Wow, I mean, what a devastating game. 32 moves. Ding is checkmated, basically. And what a smooth victory from Nepo. So, you know, how come it's so smooth? I mean, normally, you know, at this level, it's very unusual that a player manages to conduct a game where his opponent doesn't manage to sort of cut across this plan. But, you know, Nepo's attack ran so smoothly. Like I said, I think right from this moment where Ding declined the pawn in the middle, he was on the back foot. But there were a few moments later when he really hesitated. Now let me come back to this position, for example. So here is where Ding played knight a4. It's quite slow. Why not b5? Just to open up lines straight away. So the knight will come back and white exchanges on c6, and you can see that, you know, there's something to play for there. I'm not saying black is worse, but it's a distraction. Black will be distracted from the kingside play. Okay, and later on, gee, this is a very interesting moment where Nepo has brought the rook to e6, and now these ideas of g5 are coming very quickly. And here's a moment where b5 could also be played. So if pawn takes, so it's a nice pawn sacrifice, knight a5, you can see that obviously lines are opening there, that's a distraction. And knight takes, well, you know, why is white giving a pawn away? Well, after rook takes, you'll remember in the game that knight blocked out white's pieces. But just for a moment here, this is actually very interesting compensation, because if black isn't breaking on the king side, then the queen and to some extent the bishop could be a little bit out of play. So for example, well, if black prepares g5 with h6, let's push that back. Rook here, you see, this is one of the points. It's opening up the b file like this. Knight d6. Now, this knight is on a nice square. The pawn is vulnerable. Well, for the pawn, white obviously has very nice counterplay there. So, you know, there were moments where Ding could have upset the smooth flow of black's attack, but somehow didn't recognize the danger, or, you know, it was basically too little too late in the game. So I think Ding showed a kind of uncharacteristic hesitancy and poor judgment. And, well, that is an absolutely fantastic start for Nepo. Could well be that this pawn sacrifice was prepared especially for this game. Could be this is a kind of hangover from the World Championship match. Perhaps Nepo had prepared this for his match against Carlsen and wasn't able to use it. Who knows? Anyway, a very good start for Jan Nepomniachtchi. I'm going to show you another video as well, so do check that out, because it was an extraordinary first round where all the games had great interest. There was a lot going on. I'll be producing reports all the way through the candidates tournament, so do watch out for them. Thanks for watching.